Hey guys, welcome to another movie review. Today I'm talking about the new Beetlejuice sequel entitled Beetlejuice Beetlejuice. And if any of you know kind of the lore of this franchise, if you say his name three times, he's supposed to appear. So I guess that's kind of the what they're trying to do with this title is saying his name two times. And if they make a third film, obviously it's going to be his name three times more than likely. But in this film, though, guys, it is almost it is over 30 years since the last film. We find the Deetz family kind of reuniting for a funeral. And, it's three generations of the Deetz now. We have, Winona Ryder, we have Catherine O'Hara as the grandmother now, and we also have Jenna Ortega as the youngest of the family now as well. She's Lydia's daughter. And they're reuniting for this funeral. And Winona Ryder, we found out since the first film, is basically running like a ghost hunters type of show. And the daughter, that's played by Jenna Ortega, never really believes that her mom could really see these ghosts the way that we saw her do that in the first film. And so basically, Jenna Ortega is basically kind of in a breaking point where she really wants to really see if this is something her mom can do. And since they are basically at the old house that a lot of her mom's kind of fame and reputation came from, she wants to be able to kind of test this ability herself. But while doing this, she encounters a young man that lives in the town that her mom's house used to be in. And they kind of have a little bit of a romantic fling. And she basically gets this opportunity to see the afterlife for herself without having to be dead to be able to see it. And she also never really got to see her biological father. Like, it's something that her mom never really talks about very often. There's this new man played by Justin Theroux that's trying to win her heart, trying to get, trying to marry her and stuff like that. And she really doesn't get along with him. And she takes this young man's opportunity of basically getting to know the afterlife. As a result, certain things about the deal don't work out as well as she's hoped. And there's certain aspects of the deal that could potentially keep Jenna Ortega in the afterlife if she's not careful. So with all this trouble and all this drama going on, Lydia kind of gets caught up on all this stuff that's going on. And since Beetlejuice obviously has connections to the afterlife, she basically summons Beetlejuice to basically help her out, get her daughter back, make sure that she's really not dead, that she can stay alive in the reality somewhere, and that she's not permanently dragged into the afterlife after basically having a lot of years left of life left to live herself. But overall, guys, I really enjoyed this new Beetlejuice sequel. It's a ton of fun. I really enjoyed myself. It was very entertaining. I'm a pretty casual Beetlejuice fan. I would say I watch the first film every once in a while. I don't like watch it every Halloween or anything like that. But I did watch the animated series throughout the 90s and 2000s. There was a pretty big show for the most part. I think a lot of people who grew up at that time, I think it was on Cartoon Network, I want to say, so it was probably the rerun era of the show. A lot of people really grew up with that. That's kind of where a lot of their love for Beetlejuice came from. So I've been a pretty casual fan. I've been interested to kind of see if they would ever do a sequel. I know that at one point they wanted to put Beetlejuice in Hawaii, and there was another time where they were kind of going to go more the romantic tragedy route, which they kind of explore in this film. But I know an earlier script was really going to kind of double down on that idea. So I know there's been whispers over the years. I know Tim Burton's been kind of like, if I'll do a sequel if I really come up with an idea that really interests me quite a bit. So I know there was always kind of interest to do one, and here we are. They made another one, and turned out to be quite good. But I do want to go over some positives and negatives of things I really enjoyed about the film, while other things that I think also could have been better about the film as well. For my positives for the film, though, almost everything you would want out of a legacy sequel, this film does. It tells a new story. It brings back the characters that you want them to bring back. New concepts are explored. Concepts from the earlier film get explored further. So if you like that whole afterlife aspect of the first Beetlejuice, they explore a lot more of that in this film. They really kind of build on the lore and explain more stuff and kind of ground the rules a little bit more in this film. And they also kind of do it with a more story momentum kind of, rather than just, exploring ideas and showing off kind of Tim Burton's abilities. The film really does allow for this world and the story to kind of explore itself and it isn't too concerned with how stylistic it is. There's plenty of style. The production design looks great, but it really is about the story this time around. And I really like how this legacy sequel really does what you would want a legacy sequel to do, where it's telling a new story, bringing back the old stuff, while also exploring new stuff as well that you were hoping that this lore of Beetlejuice was going to explore eventually. I also kind of like where all the Deetz family members are. It is cool that the grandmother now, Catherine O'Hara, has her own art gallery, is kind of has her fans, but at the same time is kind of struggling to get along with other people just because the way she thinks is so different from everybody else. I do like that Lydia has her own ghost hunter show. She's really kind of expanding on this ability that she has ever since she was a teenager, and obviously this is creating a lot of fans, and obviously gave her a new love interest and things like that. And I also kind of like what they're doing with Jenna Ortega's character, that she's kind of in this all school for girls, and she's kind of picked on every once in a while because of her mom's abilities and how things played out in the first film, and kind of how it's this urban legend now of what her mom was doing and stuff like that. So it was just kind of fun to catch up with the Deetz, figure out where they all are, and how this funeral kind of deconstructed them while also kind of made them want to work together at the same time. And it was just fun to see kind of where all those characters have been over the course of 30 years. And like I mentioned before, the production design is very awesome in this movie. Tim Burton definitely applies his style here. I also think he kind of expands it to really make it feel like the afterlife doesn't have a lot of lighting. Like it's really just kind of a couple of blue lights, a couple of green lights. I also like how people don't really talk very often in the afterlife this time around. Like in the first one, it was more like however they died from, that's what they looked like, and they still kind of kept their personality. I like how this time around the afterlife is more people don't really speak very often. Like they'll guide you to where you need to go for this office, for getting a number and figuring out where you're going to go and stuff like that, but they don't really like have like full-blown conversations. Like there's literally a character that just points a character in the right direction for where they need to go. And like there's this janitor that Danny DeVito has a cameo with, that once again will guide you to where you need to go, but won't have like a full-blown conversation with you or anything. But I just like the overall production design. It looks fantastic. Definitely continues the first film, also exploring new ideas. And I think this is kind of the best way to do a Beetlejuice sequel, is give us the stuff we want while exploring new stuff as well. I also just loved the use of practical effects in this movie. They brought back the sand snake. They did a lot of the effects practically. For the stuff that they did use of CGI, they did try to make it look like it was done as practically as they could. Kept the CGI as limited as they could as well. And I think that's just a really refreshing thing to do in today's technology, in today's film world, is to bring back a piece of technology that we thought was long gone, but they've brought it back for this kind of a film. They kept the vibe, they kept the look, they kept the way that everything looks kind of handcrafted and stylized the way Tim Burton would do it. And I just love how the film brings that back and really brings that skill with practical effects into full use. I also loved how the returning cast is back, and they also brought in some new characters that feel very welcomed here. I thought Monica Bellucci's character was a lot of fun. I actually really liked Justin Theroux's character. I thought a lot of his jokes were really funny. I was finding myself laughing out loud at a lot of his stuff. He also kind of has like a quirkyism to him that matches Lydia's personality. So it was kind of fun to see the two of them together because they felt like they had matching personalities. And I thought that was a lot of fun. I also thought Willem Dafoe's character of this detective that played a lot of movie roles, and the role that he had around the time he passed away, he's still pursuing in the afterlife. Very fun character. And like I said, it was just fun to see a lot of the returning cast members come back for another cool role for them to do. It was just great to see a bunch of characters that I cared about and characters that, were felt welcomed, and I felt invested overall in almost all of them. I also like how the film asks and pursues the way the afterlife is depicted. There's just a lot of things where, if you have a biological person or somebody in your family tree that you've always wanted to see in the afterlife, the film kind of explores what the Beetlejuice world would do if you really were trying to pursue and how you would track down someone that, you know, you lost years ago, and going about kind of a final goodbye and stuff like that. So I just like how the film depicts the afterlife, grounds more rules to it, and also explores the stuff that you want them to explore the way the first film introduced us to that world. And this really has to be brought up. Michael Keaton really is terrific as Beetlejuice. I mean, he was so fun the first film, but they also give him more screen time this time around, which I really admired. That was actually kind of one of my nitpicks with the first Beetlejuices. I thought they could have utilized the character more, but in this film, I feel like they give him much more screen time. They give him much more to do. He's much more involved with the story as well, and it's just so cool to see Michael Keaton in his 70s and still being able to bring these really energetic characters to life still, just as well as he did when he was younger. And it was just terrific to see him play this character again and to bring so much energy to the role again. It really is cool to see him still be able to have that skill of being either the scariest man in the room or your best friend in the world. And he knows how to balance both of those worlds in almost all his characters really, really well. And he does it terrifically here in Beetlejuice. But for my negatives of this movie, though, there is a lot of things that feel easily resolved by the third act because there is so many subplots in this film. It does feel very easily resolved by the time you get to that third act. It does just feel like, oh, well, all they had to do was this, and all they had to do was that, and all they had to do was say these couple of words. It just felt very wrapped up too quickly, and I don't know if the film either could have been longer to do that, or if they just had to find a way to find a more interesting way to wrap things up. It almost felt like they had the concepts going, but they didn't know how to wrap things up by the time the credits were rolling. And that's kind of what it felt like to me. It just felt like everything felt super easily resolved, and it really would have been a very long movie if a lot of these characters made these realizations earlier on. It just feels very quickly resolved. I didn't like that aspect of the third act of the film. There's also just a lot of coincidences. There's just a lot of scenes where Lydia Deetz just shows up right at the very wrong second. If she showed up any second earlier, she could have resolved something. This is regarding a Jenna Ortega choice that of her going into the afterlife. And there's just a lot of scenes like that where, like, if the character just showed up 1 second sooner, they could have resolved certain situations much sooner. And there's just so many coincidences in this film. It's just like, okay, they probably could have wrote that a little bit better. The film also just tries to do a lot at the same time. There's just so many subplots, so many things they got to jump around to within this movie to make everything work. And I really do feel like they probably should have just taken their best ideas, maybe throw a couple things in there every once in a while, but for the most part, stick to your best ideas. And if worst case scenario, save something for a sequel or something, and really give us the best possible Beetlejuice sequel you can based on the material that you're trying to use. And I think this film would have been better as a result as well. And overall, I just feel like this film isn't quite as original as that first film. I thought the original film really brought something kind of unique and different and admirable to it. And I really just wish this film could have been as original, if not more original, than that film. There's also something that happens with Justin Theroux's character at the very end of the film that I thought also could have been better. To make this really fun, quirky character, this kind of insufferable human being by the very final minutes of the film, I thought was a very bad creative choice, and I really wish they could have wrapped his character up in a more pleasant way. But overall, I'm going to give Beetlejuice an 8.5 out of 10. Very fun film, very great sequel, a very worthy successor to the first film, though not quite as good as the first Beetlejuice film, but very worthy successor, very fun film. If you're a huge Tim Burton fan or Beetlejuice fan, I highly recommend you see this film. It's an 8.5 out of 10 for me. I highly recommend it. Be sure to see Beetlejuice.